In March 2022, Kouri Richins was a 31-year-old real estate agent living in Summit County, Utah. She had 3 young sons, a beautiful home near the mountains, and a husband named Eric who had spent his whole life building everything they owned with his bare hands. Then one morning, Eric was found cold and unresponsive in their bed. He had 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl in his blood. And within hours of his body being wheeled out of their home, Kouri Richins was already searching online for gifts. Not a funeral home, not a grief counselor. Gifts, the kind you give someone to celebrate. In the months that followed, she wrote a children's book about losing Eric. She went on television. She wiped tears from her eyes. She spoke about grief and love and how to keep going when someone is suddenly taken from you. What nobody knew is that Eric himself had told his own family, months before he died, to watch out for his wife if anything ever happened to him. He said it with his own voice, in his own words. This is the story of how a mother of 3 asked her housekeeper for what she called the Michael Jackson stuff, poisoned her husband with it, wrote a book profiting from his death, and stood in front of her own children in a courtroom 4 years later still insisting she was innocent. It is also noteworthy that to this day, Kouri Richins refuses to admit any guilt whatsoever. If you are new here, welcome to Real Crime Chronicles, and this is what we do. Real cases, real people, real consequences. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell right now so you never miss a story. Drop a comment below telling me what you already think about this case, because I want to hear from you. Now let us get into it. To understand what happened on the night of March 4th, 2022, you have to first understand who Eric and Kouri Richins appeared to be, and then understand who they actually were behind closed doors. Eric Richins was a hardworking man, a contractor. He had built his own business from the ground up in the kind of way that makes people respect you, not because of inherited money or lucky connections, but because of sheer effort. He was 39 years old. He had 3 sons he absolutely adored. By all accounts, anyone who met Eric remembered him as warm, real, and genuine. He was a family man in the truest sense of the word. Kouri was 31 at the time. She worked as a real estate agent, buying houses, fixing them up, and flipping them for profit. It was the kind of work that could make you very rich very fast, or bury you in debt just as quickly. From the outside, the Richins family looked like a success story. A beautiful home in Summit County, Utah, 3 young boys, a thriving contracting business, a wife growing her own property empire. But underneath that polished surface, cracks were forming, and not small ones. Kouri's house-flipping business was hemorrhaging money. When forensic accountants eventually went through her finances, the number they found was staggering. Her liabilities, the money she owed, had climbed to nearly $8 million. $8 million. That is not a temporary cash flow problem. That is a business in freefall. And at the exact moment her financial world was collapsing, she had just made an even bigger bet. She had purchased what would be described in court as the Midway Mansion, a nearly 10-acre estate just outside of Salt Lake City, in the shadow of Park City's famous ski resorts. The property was her dream flip, the one that was going to save everything. She believed she could walk away with close to $10 million in profit. But first, she needed money she did not have. And her husband Eric? Between his contracting business, their properties, and his life insurance policies, Eric Richins was worth over $4 million. Dead. Here is the detail that makes this case unlike almost any other you will come across. Eric Richins told his family, not after the fact, not in hindsight, not in some letter they found later. He told them while he was still alive, while Kouri was still sleeping beside him, while everything still looked fine from the outside. He sat down with his family, the people who loved him, and he said, "If something ever happens to me, look at Kouri." That conversation happened in the months leading up to his death. Think about what that means. Eric Richins had come to a place in his marriage where he genuinely feared for his life. He did not go to the police. Maybe he thought they would not believe him. Maybe he was not certain himself. Maybe some part of him still hoped he was wrong. But he went to his family. He planted a flag. He said, "Remember this. Remember what I am telling you right now." And so when the call came in the early hours of March 4th, 2022, and Eric's family heard what had happened, it was not confusion they felt. It was horror. Not the horror of the unexpected. The horror of a nightmare you had already dreamed. This is what Kouri Richins told police happened that evening. She said she and Eric had been celebrating. She had just taken a major step forward on the Midway Mansion deal, and there was reason to feel good about things. She said she prepared drinks for them, a Moscow Mule, possibly a lemon drop shot, and they toasted to the future. Later that night, she said she fell asleep in one of the children's rooms while putting one of the boys to bed. When she woke up and came back to their bedroom, she found Eric cold. She said she called 911 immediately and began performing CPR. That was Kouri's version. But investigators, as they began pulling apart that version piece by piece, found that almost nothing about it matched the physical evidence. Start with the 911 call itself. The recording of that call became one of the most chilling pieces of evidence in the entire trial. There is no screaming, no desperate sobbing. The emergency operator repeatedly asks her to put the phone on speaker so she can perform CPR properly with both hands. Kouri says she has done so. But here is where technology caught her in a lie. A digital forensic analyst examined the phone data and found something called proximity sensor activity, a sensor inside the phone that activates when you hold the receiver up to your ear. The data showed that throughout the 911 call, Kouri was holding the phone to her ear. She had never put it on speaker, which means she was not doing CPR the way she claimed. Either she was doing it one-handed, barely, or she was not doing it at all. The jurors who later spoke publicly said this was one of the moments that hit them hardest. Kouri had sent text messages to her friend the same morning, describing how she had pounded on Eric's chest, screaming at him to come back, begging him not to leave her. The messages were detailed and emotional. The phone data told a different story. Then there was her behavior when police arrived. Body camera footage from the responding officers showed Kouri holding her face in her hands, appearing to hide her expression. Meanwhile, Eric's sister Katie arrived at the house shortly after, and the contrast was stark. Katie was hyperventilating. She was barely able to speak. Her first thought, through her tears, was the children. Are the boys okay? Kouri's first conversation with Katie that morning was not about Eric. It was about real estate. She told Katie she was going to sell the house they were standing in, and that she needed to close on the Midway Mansion. Eric had not even been pronounced dead long. You are watching Real Crime Chronicles, and this case is only getting darker from here. If you have not subscribed yet, do it right now. It takes 2 seconds, and it means everything for this channel. Share this video with someone who loves true crime, because they need to know about Kouri Richins. Now let us keep going, because the fentanyl did not just appear out of nowhere. Investigators initially thought Eric Richins may have died from an accidental drug overdose. He had a history of using pain medication. He suffered from chronic knee and back pain, the kind that comes from years of hard physical labor. There was an empty hydrocodone bottle found on his nightstand. He had used marijuana gummies. He had recently returned from a trip to Mexico, which the defense would later use as a talking point. But as the investigation deepened, the theory of accident was replaced by something far more calculated. The key to understanding how the fentanyl got to Eric Richins is a woman named Carmen Lauber. She was Kouri's housekeeper. She also cleaned homes connected to Kouri's real estate business. And according to prosecutors, she was the link between Kouri and the drugs that killed Eric. Carmen testified that in the months before Eric's death, Kouri had asked her on 4 separate occasions to purchase illegal substances. The first requests were for pain medication, described as being for a client. But then, about 2 weeks before Eric died, Kouri asked for something stronger. And here is the detail that stopped everyone cold when prosecutors revealed it in court. Kouri did not ask for fentanyl by name. She asked Carmen for what she called the Michael Jackson stuff. Think about that for a moment. Kouri Richins told her housekeeper she wanted the same drug that killed Michael Jackson. The prosecution made the point plainly in closing arguments. She did not know the street name. She did not know how to order it from the criminal world. But she knew exactly what she wanted it for. She wanted it because it is lethal, because it kills. Carmen reached out to a contact and came back with an answer. She could get it. And Kouri said yes. When the autopsy results came back on Eric Richins, the number confirmed everything. Eric did not have a trace of fentanyl in his system. He did not have a small amount. He did not have a dangerous amount. He had roughly 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl in his blood. 5 times. That is not an accident. That is not someone who stumbled onto something he did not know was dangerous. That is a deliberate, calculated, measured act of killing. Carmen was not a pristine witness. She had a criminal history involving drug charges. She had made a deal with investigators, cooperate, and avoid prison time. The defense hammered this relentlessly in cross-examination, playing recordings of investigators pushing Carmen to give them more, specifically about fentanyl, specifically about Kouri's intent. It was uncomfortable to watch. There was no question that law enforcement wanted a particular outcome from Carmen's testimony. But here is what the defense could not shake. 800 text messages between Kouri and Carmen. The actual content of those messages had been deleted. But the metadata, the dates, the times, the pattern of communication matched Carmen's testimony precisely. Every claim she made about when Kouri contacted her lined up with the phone records. The jurors said they found Carmen credible, not because her past was clean, but because the data backed her up. If the fentanyl-laced Moscow Mule was Kouri's second attempt to kill her husband, then what happened on Valentine's Day 2022, just 2 weeks before Eric died, was the first? Prosecutors told the jury that Kouri had served Eric a breakfast sandwich that morning, and Eric became violently ill. He needed to use an EpiPen. He was seriously unwell. At the time, the couple and their friends laughed it off as an allergic reaction. Kouri's friend Ally testified that everyone joked about it. Don't eat what Kouri makes you. Eric himself did not seem to hold it against her. But in the context of what came next, prosecutors argued this was not an accident. This was a test run, and it nearly worked. The jury agreed. They found Kouri guilty not just of Eric's murder, but of attempted aggravated murder for the Valentine's Day sandwich. 2 separate attempts. 2 separate decisions to end her husband's life. Every murder needs a why. And in Eric Richins' case, prosecutors presented not one motive, but 3. The first was money. $8 million in debt. A husband whose life was worth over $4 million. A life insurance policy she had secretly taken out on Eric just 1 month before his death, $100,000, with herself as the sole beneficiary, signed with a forged version of Eric's signature. A handwriting expert testified that the signature on that policy was not written by Eric Richins. It was not even close. The second was the mansion. The Midway Mansion was not just a house. It was Kouri's way out. Her rescue plan. The deal that was going to clear the debt, restore her image, and cement her identity as a successful businesswoman. But she needed cash she did not have. Eric's death would bring that cash. The third was a man. His name was Josh Grossman. He was a handyman she had met through her house-flipping business. They had been in a relationship for about 2 years, a full affair, running parallel to her marriage the entire time. Josh testified at trial. He was clearly torn up about it. He cried on the stand. He said that after he found out Kouri had been arrested for Eric's murder, he reached out to Eric's family, overwhelmed with guilt. Jurors said they found him deeply believable. What Josh described in his testimony was damning. He told the court that at some point during their relationship, Kouri had asked him a question that, in the light of everything that came after, was impossible to explain away. She had asked him, knowing he had served in the military overseas, if he had ever killed anyone. And then she asked how it made him feel. Josh also told prosecutors about text messages between them. Messages where Kouri wrote things like, "Life is going to be different, I promise." Messages where she said if she were divorced right now, she would want to marry him. Messages where she talked about lying on the couch, cuddling, watching a murder documentary. And then there was the booking. About 3 months before Eric died, Kouri had made a reservation at the secret St. Martin's Resort, a romantic getaway for 2, planned for April, exactly 1 month after Eric's death. She had booked the trip before Eric was gone. The reservation, the jurors said, was one of the things that sealed it for them. This was not a crime of passion. This was not a snap decision made in a moment of desperation. This was a plan, a timeline, a future that required Eric to be dead by a specific date. Amongst all the digital evidence, the phone records, the expert testimony, and the financial forensics, one piece of physical evidence stood out in its simplicity. Investigators found a note inside a kitchen cabinet. The prosecution walked the jury through it carefully. The note appeared to chronicle the events of the night Eric died. It referenced the drink being served in bed. It laid out a sequence, what happened when, in what order. Why would an innocent woman who had simply found her husband cold and unresponsive have written this note? Why would her own account of events start, not with finding Eric's body, but with the moment she made him a drink? The prosecution made this point quietly but precisely. The story Kouri told, even in her own writing, began with the drink. Everything began with the drink. 3 weeks, 40 witnesses for the prosecution. A mountain of evidence that had been built brick by brick, detail by detail, across days of testimony. And then the defense made a decision that stunned everyone in that courtroom. They rested without calling a single witness. No character witnesses. No medical experts to challenge the cause of death. No one to testify about Eric's drug use. No testimony about the Mexico trip. No explanation for the forged signature. Nothing. Kouri herself did not take the stand. Jurors Laura and Eric, who agreed to speak publicly after the trial while keeping their last names private, said their jaws dropped. They had been bracing themselves for days more of testimony. They had expected the defense to challenge the evidence point by point. They were ready to weigh competing narratives. Instead, silence. Kouri's legal team argued in their closing that the prosecution had never proven how the fentanyl actually got inside Eric's body. The cups were washed in the dishwasher the next morning by the nanny before anyone could test them. There was no direct, physical proof of the moment of poisoning. They argued the investigation had been compromised from the start, driven by Eric's family, who had always believed Kouri was guilty, and who had essentially directed law enforcement toward a predetermined conclusion. It was a reasonable doubt argument, and in some ways, it was the right argument. Because there was no video, there was no confession, there was no witness who watched Kouri pour fentanyl into a glass. But the jury had spent 3 weeks watching everything else, and what they saw told a complete story, even without those missing pieces. 8 people, 3 hours of deliberation. That was all it took. Laura, the jury foreperson, said that the moment they walked back into that deliberation room, she could feel it. Everyone was ready to talk. Everyone had already made up their minds. The 911 call, the proximity sensor on the phone, the Valentine's Day sandwich, Carmen Lauber's testimony backed up by 800 data points, the forged life insurance policy, the trip to St. Martin's booked before Eric was dead, the text messages to Josh about a different life, the gifts Kouri browsed on her phone within hours of finding her husband's body, the note in the cabinet, the internet searches she made after investigators showed up with a warrant, luxury prisons for the rich in America. How long do life insurance companies take to pay? If someone is poisoned, what does it show on the death certificate? When they voted, it was unanimous. On March 16, 2026, nearly 4 years after Eric Richins died, Judge Richard Mrazek read the verdict. Guilty. Aggravated murder. Guilty. Attempted aggravated murder. Guilty. 2 counts of insurance fraud. Guilty. Forgery. All 5 counts. Every single one. Kouri Richins stood perfectly still as the verdict was read. Her friend Greg Hall, who had supported her throughout and genuinely believed in her innocence, said she was absolutely crushed. Devastated. She had walked into that courtroom convinced she was going to walk out free. 2 months after the verdict, on what would have been Eric Richins' 44th birthday, Kouri was brought back to court for sentencing. This time in a prison uniform. This time in shackles. And this time, for the first time, the world heard from the 3 boys. Their names are Weston, Ashton, and Carter. They were 5, 7, and 9 years old when Eric died. They were 9, 11, and 13 by the time their mother was sentenced. They had been living with Eric's sister Katie and her husband since Kouri's arrest. Their statements were written by themselves and read aloud in court by their counselors, because seeing their mother in that courtroom was too much to ask of children who had already lost everything. Weston, the youngest, said he feels a lot better about himself now than he did when living with Kouri. He said he wants her to go to prison forever. He said if she got out, he would be scared. Really scared. Ashton, the middle child, was more specific about what life had been like. He accused Kouri of not caring for him or his brothers. He described having to parent his younger siblings himself, walking them to the bus stop, feeding them, watching over them when no one else did. He talked about how their dog was not allowed outside, and when it relieved itself inside, Kouri would hit it on the head as hard as she could. He described how his kitten was refused shelter in the garage at night and was found the next morning, eaten by raccoons. How the chickens and bunnies were not allowed heat lamps in winter and froze to death. None of this had come up during the trial. The jury never heard it. This was the first time any of it was made public. Ashton's final words in his statement: "You took away my dad for no reason other than greed." Carter, the eldest, said that Kouri was frequently drunk, that she would lock him in his room if he told her she was drunk, that his brother Ashton would bring him food while he was locked inside. He said he misses his father every day. But he also said something that stopped the courtroom cold. "I miss my dad, but I do not miss how my life used to be. I don't miss Kouri." They did not call her mom. Not one of them. Kouri Richins was allowed to speak before sentencing. She had not testified at trial. This was the first time anyone heard directly from her since the arrest. She spoke for about 30 minutes. She addressed her boys. She told them she loved them. She said she would always try to find ways to reach them, even from prison, even if her calls were blocked. She said she would never be angry at them for their feelings. And then she said this case had been decided by 8 people who had never met her, who did not know her, who had reached their conclusion in less than 3 hours. She maintained her innocence completely. She expressed no remorse for Eric's death, no acknowledgement of what the evidence showed, no recognition of what her children had just said publicly on the record in that same room. Eric's sister Amy said something that stayed with everyone who heard it. She said she had not just lost her brother. She had lost Kouri too, someone she had genuinely considered a friend. She described grieving 2 people at once, the brother who was gone and the sister-in-law she thought she knew. And then she said this: Kouri did not just kill Eric. She attempted to kill the spirit of everyone who loved him. She lied to his children. She lied to the world. And she has shown no remorse while dancing on his grave for profit. Judge Richard Mrazek had 2 options: 25 years to life, with the possibility of parole, or life without parole. He took his time. He said the weight of this decision, its permanence, its reach, the lives it would affect for decades, was not something he took lightly. And then he sentenced Kouri Richins to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She will die in prison. She will not see her sons grow up. She will not attend their graduations or their weddings. She will not meet her grandchildren. Eric's family spokesperson said the only true tragedy in this entire story is the one that lives inside 3 boys who lost their father because of their mother's greed, and who now carry the weight of both those losses for the rest of their lives. "I cannot think of anything worse as a child," he said, "than to lose your father, except to know that it was because of your mother." After Eric died, before any charges were filed, Kouri Richins went on television to talk about grief. She held up the children's book she had written, "Are You With Me?" and she spoke about loss, about how to help children understand death, about keeping the memory of a loved one alive. The book is about Eric, about losing Eric, about surviving without Eric. What is undeniable is this: somewhere in Utah, in a prison cell, Kouri Richins is still alive. She is still appealing. She is still insisting she did nothing wrong. And 3 boys, Weston, Ashton, and Carter, are still waking up every morning without their father. The book says, "Are you with me?" Eric Richins cannot answer. That is the case of Kouri Richins, a woman who poisoned her husband for money, wrote a children's book about grieving him, and then stood in a courtroom and told her sons she was innocent, while they told the world they did not miss her. If this video moved you, hit the like button right now. Share it, send it to someone, and subscribe to Real Crime Chronicles if you have not already, because every single week we are covering cases exactly like this one. Real people, real pain, real justice. I will see you in the next one.